The smoke from Dad's prized Weber grill curled into the summer air as I pulled up to our annual family barbecue in my beat-up Honda Civic. 20 years of the same routine. Arrive late, endure the jokes, leave early. But today would be different. Look who finally showed up from his important business meeting, Dad announced to the gathered family, making air quotes with his barbecue tongs. Probably another one of his hippie environmental consultations. I smiled, setting down my worn leather briefcase. At 45, I still got treated like the family disappointment. The eldest son who'd thrown away a real career to become an environmental scientist. Actually, it was a climate resilience meeting, I said quietly, accepting a paper plate from Mom. Climate resilience, my brother Steve snorted, adjusting his investment banker tie. That's what they're calling tree hugging these days? My name is Michael Chin. For 2 decades, my family has thought I was nothing more than a low-level environmental consultant who talked to plants, instead of pursuing a respectable career in finance or medicine. What they didn't know was that I was the founder and CEO of Resilient Earth Technologies, the world's leading climate adaptation firm, with contracts in 60 countries and a valuation that would make my brother's banker salary look like pocket change. But they weren't ready for that truth. Not yet. You know, Michael, Dad said, flipping burgers with practiced precision. Stevens and Associates is always hiring. Steve could put in a word. It's not too late for a real job. I took a bite of coleslaw, remembering this morning's video conference where we'd finalized a $4.2 billion contract to protect Miami from rising sea levels. I appreciate the thought, Dad, but I'm good where I am. My sister-in-law Lisa patted my hand. At least he's not living in his car anymore, she stage whispered to my mother. I'd never lived in my car. That was their interpretation of the year I spent traveling to disaster zones, studying climate patterns and developing the algorithms that would become the foundation of Resilient Earth's prediction models. The only person who'd ever known the truth was my grandfather before he passed. A former climate scientist himself, he'd understood my vision when I started the company at 25, using his research notes and industry connections. Change the world quietly, he'd said. Let your work speak louder than their doubts. I'd followed his advice perfectly. The distant sound of helicopter blades cut through the backyard chatter. Dad looked up, shading his eyes. Probably another emergency at the hospital, he said proudly, nodding toward my sister Jane, the surgeon. But the helicopter kept getting closer. A black SUV convoy appeared at the end of our suburban street as the helicopter circled, looking for a landing spot. Men in suits and earpieces emerged, scanning the area. What the hell? Steve muttered. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah, my CEO. Governor's on his way. Category 5 heading for the coast. They need you now. Before I could respond, the helicopter touched down in the empty lot next door. Governor Richards himself stepped out, followed by his emergency response team. Dr. Chin, he called out, jogging toward our yard. Thank God we found you. The hurricane shifted course. We need your models immediately. Dad's spatula clattered against the grill. Doctor. The governor looked confused. Of course, Dr. Michael Chin, founder of Resilient Earth, the world's leading expert on climate disaster prevention. He turned back to me urgent. Please, sir. 3 million lives could depend on your predictions. The burgers weren't the only things burning on that grill. Dad's legendary barbecue fell silent except for the sizzle of forgotten meat on the grill. 20 pairs of eyes watched as I pulled my laptop from my hippie backpack. Actually a $5,000 custom-designed mobile workstation. Pull up AR7, I told the governor's aide who was already setting up a secure satellite link. We need real-time atmospheric data from the coastal buoys. The what? Steve interrupted, his banker's confidence cracking. But I was already in the zone, my fingers flying across 3 holographic displays that materialized from my laptop. 20 years of climate data flowed through proprietary algorithms, painting a terrifying picture. It's worse than we thought, I muttered, zooming into a pressure system. The warm water corridor is feeding directly into the storm's eye. We're looking at sustained winds of 190 miles per hour if it maintains this track. The governor leaned over my shoulder, his face grim. How long? 18 hours until landfall. I pulled up our prediction model, the same one my family had mocked as my cute little weather program years ago. But that's not the real problem. There's worse than a Category 5? one of the officials asked. I nodded, highlighting a complex pattern of ocean currents. The storm surge will hit exactly at king tide. We're looking at a 30-foot wall of water hitting the coast. The existing seawalls were only built for 20. My God, the governor whispered. My phone buzzed again. Sarah's face appeared on one of the displays. Michael, I've got the president's science advisor on the other line. They're mobilizing FEMA based on our models. Dad dropped his barbecue tongs. The president. I ignored him, focusing on the data. Sarah, implement Protocol Omega. I want every resilient Earth coastal defense system from Miami to Charleston activated. Full power to the wave dispersion arrays. Already done, she replied. The Singapore team is standing by for backup computing power. Should I call in the Tokyo office? Do it. And get me Dr. Yamamoto. We'll need his Storm Shepherd drones. Steve stepped forward, his voice uncertain. Storm Shepherd drones? Atmospheric modification units, I explained absently, still typing. We use them to disrupt hurricane formation. My silly little robots from the Christmas party 3 years ago? The ones you said were toys for tree huggers. The governor's phone rang. After a brief conversation, his face turned ashen. Dr. Chin. The president is asking if you'll take emergency control of the coastal defense grid. Congress is invoking the Disaster Prevention Act. My sister Jane, the surgeon, nearly choked on her wine. Congress? Our Michael? I stood up, already issuing commands through my neural interface. Another hippie gadget they'd mocked. Grid control accepted. Sarah, initiate full coastal lockdown. I want every resilient Earth installation from Florida to North Carolina at maximum power. Across the eastern seaboard, thousands of hidden facilities disguised as ordinary buildings, parks, and coastal features hummed to life. The largest climate defense network ever built, all controlled from a backyard barbecue in suburban Chicago. But you're just an environmental consultant, Dad stammered. You measure tree rings and talk about saving the whales. Actually, the governor interjected, your son is the architect of the most advanced climate defense system in human history. Those tree rings helped create the algorithms that protect every major coastal city in the world. Mom sat down heavily. Every coastal city. The seawall protecting Manhattan? I brought up a familiar design. That's mine. The flood prevention system in Tokyo? Also mine. Those consulting trips to Venice? I was installing underwater barriers to save the city from sinking. A new alarm blared. The hurricane had intensified. Sir, an aide called out, the president is asking for your immediate assessment. As I turned to the secure comm link, I caught a glimpse of my family's faces, 2 decades of dismissal and disappointment transforming into shock and disbelief. One moment, I told the aide. Then I looked at my father, still clutching his barbecue tongs like a shield against this new reality. Dad? The burgers are burning. Night fell on what had started as a simple family barbecue. The governor's emergency command center now occupied our backyard, with military-grade satellites providing real-time feeds to my holographic displays. The half-eaten burgers lay forgotten as 3 generations of Chens watched their failure coordinate the largest hurricane defense operation in history. Wave Dispersion Array 7 is online, Sarah reported through the secure link. Tokyo team confirms the Storm Shepherd drones are in position. I manipulated the 3D storm model floating above our patio table. Begin atmospheric intervention. Let's try to split this monster before it hits land. That's impossible, Steve muttered. You can't just break up a hurricane. I glanced at my brother. Remember that crazy weather machine I was building in the garage 15 years ago? The one you told everyone was my midlife crisis project? Understanding dawned on his face. The prototype is now standard equipment in every major coastal city worldwide. I turned back to the displays. Initiating sequence now. Above the Atlantic, 36 high-altitude drones moved into formation. Each one carried technology that had taken me decades to perfect, technology my family had dismissed as fantasy. Energy signature stable, Sarah reported. Beginning dispersal pattern alpha. The hurricane's eye wall visible on our screens began to show signs of disruption. 20 years of research, countless nights of work while my family thought I was playing scientist, all leading to this moment. "My God," Dad whispered, watching the Category 5 monster begin to weaken. "All those times we told you to get a real job." "Michael," Mom interrupted, her voice shaking. "Those awards in your old room, the ones we thought were from some environmental club." "Nobel Prize for Climate Science," I confirmed, still focused on the displays. "The medal from the UN Global Innovation Summit. And yes, that participation trophy you used to joke about? It's the Presidential Medal of Technology." Jane stepped forward. "But you drive a Honda Civic. Because it's good for the environment." I allowed myself a small smile. "The other car is an electric Bugatti. I use it to inspect our coastal installations." The governor's phone buzzed. After a brief conversation, he turned to me with visible relief. "Dr. Chen, the president wants to commend you. The hurricane, it's breaking up." On the screens, we watched as the massive storm system began to fragment, its energy dispersing harmlessly over the ocean. Billions in property damage and countless lives saved by technology my family had never believed in. "Holy shit," Steve breathed. "My little brother is actually the reason your beachfront condo still exists?" I finished, finally turning away from the displays. "Yes. Those environmental impact studies I kept doing in Miami? I was designing and installing the protection systems that keep the city above water." Mom sat down heavily in a patio chair. "But why didn't you ever tell us?" "I thought about all the family dinners where they'd belittled my work. The Christmas gatherings where they'd pushed real job applications into my hands. The countless times they'd apologized to friends about their son who never lived up to his potential." "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "When I tried to explain climate science, you said I was wasting my education. When I worked through holidays to build resilient Earth, you said I was avoiding real responsibility. When my first patent sold for 8 figures, Steve told everyone I was lying about my pretend company." The governor's aide approached with another phone. "Sir, the Chinese government is requesting consultation about their coastal defense grid." "Tell Beijing I'll call them back," I said in fluent Mandarin, earning another shocked look from my family. "We're still securing the Atlantic seaboard." Dad stepped forward, still holding those damn barbecue tongs. "Son, we had no idea." "That's the point, Dad." I turned back to my displays. "Success doesn't always look the way you expect it to. Sometimes it looks like a guy in worn jeans, driving a Honda Civic, quietly saving the world." Sarah's voice came through again. "Michael, preliminary damage reports coming in. 0 casualties. Minimal coastal impact. The system worked perfectly." Around me, my family stood in stunned silence, finally seeing the truth behind 20 years of assumptions. Their failure had just prevented a national catastrophe between bites of coleslaw. "Now," I said, closing my laptop, "does anyone want to know what I really do for a living?" Dawn broke over our suburban backyard, the remnants of yesterday's barbecue scattered among high-tech military equipment. The governor and his team had departed hours ago, but the weight of revelations still hung heavy in the morning air. My family hadn't left. They'd stayed all night, watching in silent awe as I coordinated with teams across the globe, witnessing the true scope of what their hippie environmentalist had built. "Your headquarters," Dad said quietly, nursing his cold coffee. "That new glass building downtown, the one that everyone says powers itself." "Resilient Earth's Global Command Center," I confirmed. "The weird architecture you complained about? Those are actually advanced atmospheric sensors. The building doesn't just power itself. It helps power half the city using clean energy." Mom touched my laptop gently as if it might disappear. "And all those times you missed family events for tree surveys?" "I was installing climate defense systems." I pulled up a global map showing Resilient Earth's network. Paris, Tokyo, Dubai. Each survey was actually a multi-billion-dollar project. That month I was finding myself in Singapore. I was building the world's largest ocean protection system. Steve, his banker's suit wrinkled from the all-night vigil, leaned forward. "The value of your company, is it really more than the GDP of most countries?" "Yes." I showed him our latest financial reports. "That silly environmental fund I tried to tell you about last Christmas? It's now the world's largest climate technology investment portfolio. My brother, Jane whispered, is actually saving the world. No, I corrected her. We are saving the world. Every person at Resilient Earth, every scientist who believed in the mission when others mocked it. Remember Karen, my hippie girlfriend from college? The one we said was distracting you from finding a real career? She's our chief technology officer now. Those crazy ideas we worked on in the garage? They're standard technology in every major coastal city. The patents are worth billions. Dad stood up suddenly, walking to the garage. He returned carrying a dusty box I hadn't seen in years. Your grandfather gave me this before he died, he said, his voice thick. Said to give it to you when I finally understood. I never opened it. Inside was a single envelope addressed to me but meant for all of them. Dear Michael, by the time they read this, the world will know what I knew all along, that true vision doesn't need validation to change the world. While they worried about your career, you were building humanity's shield against climate disaster. While they pushed for a real job, you were creating technology that will save millions of lives. I kept your secret because you asked me to. Because you understood that real change happens in the quiet moments, in garages and laboratories, not in boardrooms and country clubs. To your family reading this, your son, your brother, the one you thought was lost? He wasn't wandering, he was building. And he did it not to prove you wrong but to prove the world right. Look up at the sky. The air you breathe, the cities that still stand against rising seas, the future your children will inherit. Your hippie environmentalist helped save it all. Be proud. Always was. Love, Grandpa. Mom was crying openly now. Dad's hands trembled as he read the letter. My phone buzzed. Another crisis somewhere needed attention. But before I could check it, Dad did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He hugged me. I'm sorry, he whispered. We're all so sorry. Don't be, I said, hugging him back. Everything I built because you taught me persistence. Because Mom taught me compassion. Because Steve showed me how to think big and Jane showed me how to care about details. But we never believed in you. No, I smiled, pulling back. But I believed in myself. And sometimes that's enough. The morning sun caught the edge of my laptop, throwing rainbow patterns across our familiar backyard. Somewhere in the world, another storm was brewing, another crisis needed solving. But for now, in this moment, something else had finally been fixed. So, Steve said, attempting a smile, about that electric Bugatti? Nice try. I picked up my worn backpack. But I've got a world to save. Anyone want to see how? One by one they nodded. Ready at last to see the truth that had been in front of them all along. Sometimes the biggest achievements come wrapped in the simplest packages. Sometimes the greatest success stories are written not in prestigious titles or expensive suits, but in quiet dedication and unwavering vision. And sometimes, just sometimes, it takes a hurricane to clear the air.